What's going on, guys? Hit pause here with another cool tutorial for UE4. In this one here, what I've got is kind of a book system, like a book stacking system here. I basically got one blueprint here that I'm using, and I've got a bunch of controls over here. They're all in the default segment over here. But basically what I can do is I can say basically I can randomize the shit out of this. It's kind of hard to explain. So like say like I want them to be maybe, you know, like a little bit wider apart. Maybe I want them to be like a little bit more tilted or something. I got to be careful because I can breach here. Or maybe I want to say, hey, you know, I only want about, you know, like 10 to 8 books or something like that. Maybe I don't want them to shift their hues, or maybe I want a full color range of my books here. Maybe I want them to be vertical, so if not, okay, they'll stack this way, and then if I say it is vertical, then they'll stack up here, and then once they're vertical, I can say, hey, you know, I want them to all stack in a perfect line, or maybe I just want to kind of make them, you know, maybe like 5 to negative 10 or something like that in their how much they're going to rotate. And that's pretty much it. I mean, I've also got the ability to say how many rows here that I want, so I can say like add another row, and then once I do that, I can set individually basically how much I want to offset each particular row here. So like for this one, maybe I want to say like 1120, or maybe 1121 or something like that, or 1125 seems about right. Okay. And the reason I did that was because my actual bookshelf here is that these shelves are not the same distance apart. There's like some of them are a little bit taller than others. There's a couple, you know, things that can go wrong. Obviously, number one, you are looking at, and I can just say I knocked that off. You're looking at entirely random stuff, right? So it's going to be different every time you play the game. It'd be kind of difficult to say, hey, I want, you know, to have stuff intermixed in between here like that. The books are, in fact, there's actually 2 different books here. I kept them generally the same because in my case I want these to be science journals, but there is actually nothing stopping you from exposing the list of books that are actually available here, and you could then create many more books to add to the list. Okay, so for instance, if I say, hey, I want to have like this math book in the mix, what I need to do, actually I need to change that. I'd only planned on the 2, but let me show you guys how quick that would be. So right now I'm doing a random integer in range, so instead of that, what I would do would be to get the length, and I would subtract that by 1, and then I would use that as opposed. So the actual random integer in range, the max would be that. Okay, so from 0 to the max length, and now there's these giant ass freaking books that don't fit at all. Okay, so they don't fit, but if I come over here and I say, hey, you know, I want to actually delete that, then, you know, it goes right back. So as long as your books, you know, kind of within the same range. There's much more you could do. You could make this much more dynamic than I have it here. I don't really need it, but you could probably pick up, you could probably set a bunch of data per book. So you could say, hey, you know, each book that I add here, let me store its actual width and its height, so that I can, and then my offsets wouldn't be, because this offset right now is kind of a total distance, so I'm just accounting for how thick the book is right here. But what you could do is you could say, hey, the horizontal offset's only like 3 to 5, but it adds the thickness of the book every time, right? The way that I made it so that I would never get a breach over here, because here's the thing, like if I say, hey, you know, the horizontal books max is like 30 of them, oh, it looks fine now, right? It looks okay now. But there's maybe a chance that randomly it could breach. Let me say like 40. So everything looks fine there now, but the next time I play, all of a sudden I got books kicking out over here because it's randomly, hey, it's going within the range. So what I do to figure out how far the books can possibly go is I just match horizontal, and so for the amount of space I just use the same value. So I'll say, hey, the most that we can have is 25, or let's say even 20 to 20, and so that's still too far, so we'll say, okay, like 18 to 18. Okay, so now there's no randomization here. It's always 18 books, and that's the amount of randomization we get on the end. And now I can say, okay, well, now I want my minimum to be like 8 books. So it'll never breach the edge because I dialed it with these being equal. And then the number of books vertically, this isn't something I would necessarily use here. I could probably, because you'll notice that it's screwed up. I really should do a thing where I can have multiple rows of this, maybe even create a grid of them. But the cool thing is that they're instances, so it doesn't really matter that, I mean, right now I've got actually basically three books here. That's all I'm counting in terms of the performance loss. So if I say, hey, I want this to be, like 90 books tall, anywhere from 80 to 90 books tall, like that, it's like totally just gonna work, and it just counts as one book. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys how I did it. It's not too hard, but there is kind of a little bit of a lot of stuff that I've kind of done, but not really too much or anything like that, too much craziness. So I'm going to show you guys the material first. How do we get the randomization in the material here? So we just got a little bit of randomization here, same thing here. So the actual material is here. I gave myself a bunch of other controls that I didn't really need. So basically I'm giving myself a pretty dark value here, like a 0.25 in the red. Okay, obviously I've got some textures for some leather stuff. I mean, your books can be colored, using whatever textures you want. And then I just came here and I said, okay, I'm going to take a hue shift and I'm going to multiply that by the hue shift range, and then I'm going to throw a per instance random. Now per instance random works great on foliage, it works great on instance mesh. It doesn't do squat for a placed static mesh, like just a standard static mesh does nothing. It's got to be an instance. Okay, so what it's going to do is going to return you per instance a random value between 0 and 1. Okay, now the hue shift, I've shown that before. The hue shift just takes whatever values are here. Okay, by meaning I'm going to go ahead and say saturation is what we're looking at here, and it's going to shift that across the hue spectrum. Okay, for 0 would be no shift, 1 would be no shift because it would have shifted all the way back to the same thing. Okay, so this is how I can determine, I just multiply that, so my instance is 0.5. If I've multiplied that down here, then it's barely going to shift it. Okay, I've thrown a desaturation thing in here. I thought maybe I may want to control that. You could always randomize this just a little bit if you wanted to. Now here's the thing, instances have absolutely no ability to distinguish themselves from the rest of the pack in any way whatsoever, except for their size and transforms and stuff like that. But in terms of their materials, you cannot create like a dynamic material instance for each instance and have it be different. Okay, like if you want to change one book to blue and the other one to red, that's not going to work if you just use a scalar parameter and a material instance, basically a dynamic material instance. It won't work. The only thing that does work is the per instance random. Okay, so we just basically use that, and then we use ranges and things like that. So you cut for anything you want to have just individually distinguished on your materials. You're going to want to use this kind of node here if it's a material. Because remember, these objects are identical. They're instances of each other. So this thing overrides that, which is a nice handy thing. But if I didn't have this and I just did hue, shift, range, all the books are going to change to the same color. I can make them all blue, I can make them all green, I can make them all red, but I can't make them varied without this. Okay, and then everything else is nothing. It's just I got a normal map, I got texture coordinates should I want it, ambient occlusion should I want it, specular should I want to adjust it, multiply should I want to adjust it. They're just there. I'm not even really using them. No, I don't really care to do that. So here is the actual thing. Everything's done in the construction script. The components is actually basically empty. Now I know they show up here, but I only have a root scene here. That's all I got. Okay, so everything's done in the construction script, and I got several variables here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is create that vertical offset list based on how many vertical rows of books that I want to have. So every time I come in here and I change the vertical number of books vertically, the vertical offset array will add more of these. Now I originally had it so that they were adding on top of each other, so this one went up 180, this one went up 190, this one went up 260, but I changed it so that the actual values here would be individual, because I found that if I'll come back and I'll realize, oh shit, this one's like too low or this one's too high, so I raise it up, and then this one's now too high, this one's too high, this one's too high, so I got to raise everything up. So I decided to separate them individually here. So what we do is we iterate through how many vertical columns we have. Okay, so what we're going to do for each and every, I'm just going to do a save all for the crash, for the inevitable Unreal Engine that never crashes crash. Okay, so for however many books vertically we have, we're going to just run a standard loop, for loop. Okay, and then so on the first row we're going to run through how many horizontal books we have. Okay, and the loop body is here. I should attach this in here. So what we do is we add an instance static mesh component, then we add the instance of it. Okay, you have to do that, otherwise nothing shows up, and then we set the static mesh. Okay, now the transform for this is this is actually should just be current position, not current horizontal position. So I'm going to go ahead and change that. Okay, so we don't actually care about the transform here, but the transform here matters, because what we're doing is I have random pitch, okay, right here. Now what I'm doing is I'm selecting a float based on is it vertical. So if it is vertical, we pick A. So we just add an additional 90 degrees to it, and then we make the pitch. Okay. If we are vertical, we can basically activate the random yaw. If we're not vertical, we just keep the yaw at 0, because I don't want the books in here tilting in yaw, because then they're going to be doing this kind of tilt, right? I don't want that kind of okay. I don't want that kind of rotation if they're vertical. So basically on just a select, okay, remember this is pick A, so if it's true it goes to A, if it's false it goes to B. So same thing here. So if we're not vertical, if we're not vertical, we're going to add 0, okay, to the pitch. Okay, so because what we do is the books default actually flat on the ground. I add 90 degrees to them, because if you notice my random pitch min and max here are actually 88 and 92. Okay, so I'm allowing like a 4-degree rotation. So it's I kind of went 90 degrees in general, and then kind of undid it. So I know I kind of did that a little bit backwards, but the reason that I did that was just because of the order that I did everything. I created the bookshelf version first. I added the ability to stack the books later. As you can see, it's kind of tacked in here. Okay, so We make a rotation out of that, and that becomes the rotation. Current position, which will start at 0, 0, 0, 0, okay, becomes this, and we just create a transform. There's nothing stopping you from doing some code for the scale too, if you wanted to thin them out a little bit, make one thicker than the other and stuff like that. Then what we do is we set the mesh, and setting the mesh is as simple as just getting a random piece of the array based on the length of the array minus 1. Okay, minimum 0 because we want to be able to pick the first item in the array, but the last item in the array is always going to be length minus 1, so we get that and we set that as the new mesh. Then I create the dynamic material instance, okay, off of each one, drag this over here, parameter name, hue shift range. It does happen to be element index 0 if the color shifting part of your book material, because my book actually has three materials on it. It's got the pages, it's got the cover, and it's got the side spine. Okay, so the cover itself actually is element 0. It's the first material. So I just say, okay, hue shift range, just hue shift amount. It's an exposed variable. I can set it to whatever I want. Then what we do is we run a check here. I split this up like this because it just became easier to read in the long run. I actually did it for the tutorial because there's nothing stopping you from running a select floats and doing all this stuff here, but you get all these crazy crisscross wires. So basically, if we're not vertical, each time we're going to add the horizontal offset minimum to the X. Okay, it's very important that we still drive the Z from where it is, because remember, we're getting right here. So each time we run through this loop, we get, then we add to it, then we set. So it's going to increase over time. It's not going to be a ping pong. It's going to go up and up and up and up and up. Okay, so if we are not vertical, we do it to the X position, okay, because that's sideways. If we are vertical, I'm just using the same thing. I know this should have been vertical offset, but who gives a crap? In fact, I should just probably change this to each like individual book offset or something, but I just changed it to do the Z. Okay, and it sets the current position. Now once it's run through that whole thing, remember it does this is for the first time for the first row. It's going to do all of this for the first row, right? Once it's done with the row, all we do is just add to the row. So we take the current position, okay, we add actually I didn't use this. If I switch this out because if I use this, then each row is dependent on this one. So if this row here, if the second row is 180, and then the next row would also be 180, and then that's just assuming that where you're trying to stack these things is a perfectly evenly spaced surface, and my particular bookshelf here is not. So like I said, if I do it this way, like that, then if I shift row 1 upwards, I'm shifting all of them upwards. So any of the ones that I got dialed right here are going to be screwed up, and I got to go and shift. I got to basically start from the bottom and get all the shifts correct. And if I screw it up, I got to go back and do that again. So instead I just said, you know what, I'm just going to use each and every one. Okay, so I'm not even using this at all. I'll just move this out of the way. So all we do is we just get, and the vertical offset is just picked up from the index of our vertical list here. So our iterations of through the vertical. So we pick up the first time through, we pick up 0, which is nothing, but then once it's done, we add this index, vertical offset index. And again, the vertical offsets are a list here, so index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So each time it's going to add it vertically right here. Okay, and that's it. That's it. That's the whole thing. Okay, you can pause it there. 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 You can pause that there, but I'll just zoom in on this one here, and then that one there. The final thing here. Okay, this is what happens after each one. Okay, the material once more. Magic of the material is right here. Everything else is inconsequential. Okay, it's just the textures on stuff I'm using. These things are inconsequential as well. What is consequential here is this. Okay, this being the most important node. And like I said, I mean, if I had put like 0.01 here, just all my books would be much darker. I can in fact change this, to darken them all. I can make them less desaturated if I wanted to. I could kill the saturation here just by adding 0.1 and 0.1, and that'll make it more saturated. But I like doing desaturation like this, because this happens to be a full color. Okay, we're only adding 1. So this is actually, it's darker, but it's still a primary, meaning that two of the 3 values are 0. It doesn't really matter which one you start with here. So that's it. That's everything. And again, I can make all kinds of cool stacks. I believe, I'm not entirely sure, I think that you can in fact actually say like to set them to physics so that these would crash. And I just need to move that down. So the first book will always be with no offset. Okay, which it gets kind of squirrely when it's turning around. It kind of feels weird. It's compiling every little tick here as I'm dragging it down, so I can get those on the ground. Okay, again, this is a completely separate set, so I can have those be a completely different color. But I honestly like about the 0.15 shift here, just to kind of go a little bit between green and red. And again, it's not a superbly great material or book or anything like that, but I kind of got to get this done fast, and I don't want to be going through and having to fiddle with a bunch of stuff. You don't have to randomize anything, to be honest with you. You could in fact have this so that these actually create a perfect spiral, so like a spiral staircase. Would be very easy. So instead of randomizing it on the right here, you would just constantly add whatever value it would be. So you would need to pick up the rotation first, break out the yaw, and then say add 5 every single time one of these goes through, and then it'll be 5 degrees, 5 degrees, 5 degrees, and you'll get a spiral staircase. Real easy. Real basically rudimentary, to be honest with you. This whole thing's pretty rudimentary. Really at the point of about like 180 to 0, there's not gonna be a whole lot of difference going to say like 360 to negative 360. I mean, it's just going to be random. And like I said, one of the downsides of this is the simple fact that it is random. So this is not something that you want to do in a case where you have the ability to, that it's like, I need to make sure that my characters can always jump here to here to here to here so that they can always get to this point here. That's not going to happen. In that case, what you would want to do is use something like Aller's script, where you actually hand place them all and then convert to us. I think they're actually coming out with that in one of the newer versions, where you can just take a bunch of static meshes that are out in the world and convert them to instances. But again, the one thing you gotta understand is that once they become instances, they become identical. Okay, they can't have different materials or anything like that. They can have different transforms, but that's about it. Yeah, actually, that's about it. So anything you need to do to them, like I said, you need to do in the per instance random segment of like a material, like there. And that's it. So hopefully you guys found that interesting and fun. It certainly is going to help me, because if you look at my UDK version, like, that's garbage. It's the same books over and over and over again. They don't even have textures on them. Half of it's cheated. It's just not very dynamic. Now, it is static and actually a reliable thing that you could come out, poke out, and hide and attack from, but it's just like so obviously duped, just so painfully obviously duped. Now, The ability to shift them forwards and backwards would be extremely easy. For instance, like you can see here, for instance, you can see that some of them are pushed in and some of them are pulled out. I honestly, if you guys even remotely understand what I've already done, you'll understand how it's just like I said, again, rudimentary, how infantile that would be to pull off. I mean, if you understand one, you understand the other. It's totally easy. And I think that should do it. And again, let's do a little update on R.A.T.S. Okay, so this is my UDK version. Now this is static lighting. This is built with light mass. And I'm still working on the UE4 version. This version came out pretty good. Don't get me wrong. I think I actually do kind of like it. It's pretty playable. It's actually a pretty hardcore map when you get into fighting here because there's a lot of hiding places. But once you come out of your hiding place, there's lots. Almost every hiding place has vantage over the whole thing, in just about most cases. So it actually is a pretty tough map to play, but it's fun as hell. I think there's a lot. Like I said, you can hang back and wait for people to come by into your quadrant, or you can poke out, and where everybody on the whole map can basically see you. So this, like I said, this was the UE4 version, and I'm working on translating it over into, oh no, this is the UDK version. I'm working on transferring it over into UE4, and here's the version in UE4. Now right now, like I said, I haven't really done much with the lighting. What I am using is a light propagation volume, and the light propagation volume kind of requires me to complete the shell around the house, which I haven't done yet. You can see I'm just putting a painting up here to block the light, but as I come in, you can see it'll get brighter. You get this really weird thing here, and it looks like it's bounced light from the piggy bank, but it's all super pixelated, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. I'll have to take a look at it. Let me G. It got kind of dark on me. It wasn't that dark before, but it's like I said, I'm using the dynamic global illumination thing, the what is it, light propagation volume, which gives me pretty. I mean, I got one light in the whole entire world. So this was a boys room. You guys have already seen that. These are in fact actually on completely separate levels, so I'm going to be able to stream in and out as you come in and out of here. Okay. So that's going to be cool. So the whole world will be one persistent thing. Obviously I don't have anything in here yet. I've only got the boys room in the hallway. That's what I need for my demo, so that's what I'm doing. And if you look, the positions of everything, for the most part, I'm missing a few items still here and there. I don't have that dish rack, and I don't have the clipboard. But if I say put my camera like right here on the edge of this shelf right here, and then I come here and I do kind of the same thing, and I go back and forth. Okay, this one's got a much wider viewport, so let me do that. Okay, so everything that is here in its position is exactly the same. So negative 860.6604. Okay, negative 860.6604. I'm literally copying and pasting the translation values. Right now, I feel that overall the UDK version looks fundamentally better, just because it's all built lighting and stuff, and the post-process has been tuned. It's all been just totally set up as best as I could, from kind of a long time ago. But there's a couple of things here, like for instance, this is a gold trophy, and then I've actually got the same trophy over here, gold. In the UE4 version, it's pretty cool because I have a silver one, and then I have a bronze one. Now I've changed a few things here and there. Obviously I've changed some of the materials on some of these things. Okay, this went through a little bit of a substance thing. It's a real dirty toy that the kid's been playing with. This this computer chair is different because, quite frankly, this computer chair is a piece of shit. Okay, it's just too simple and squared, and it's actually it's a very high poly mesh for not having any value to the polygons. Okay, it's like lots of subdivision going across the top surface over here where it's like not even changing shape. So a lot of wasted polygons there, plus it's a very boring shape. And I think the UE4 version is quite a bit more interesting. It's got the little thingies and stuff like that, and clear back, and you can see through it, you know, with the holes. So that's changed. Everything else, like I said, is pretty much identical. This was updated just to be lower res for the most part. The coat rack in the UDK version is rocking like 9 to 10,000 polygons, and it's just something I don't feel I want having happen. Here's the brass globe inside of UDK, which I don't think I did all that bad of a job, except, you know, kind of that hot spot right there is a little unrealistic, but here it is in UE4. I need to probably do some little bit adjustment on the values, but you know, we get the awesome screen space reflections in it, and you see the world out there in it off to the side like that, so that's going to look much nicer, obviously. Same thing here, we got the reflections are rocking off of the metal part of this Hoover. This is like a 70s vacuum cleaner here. Got some pretty nice metallic values going in on it. Okay, very glossy plastic right here. It's R.A.T.S power. Let's see, like I said, I got the books. Oh, this looks really nice right here too. Like if I look at this in UDK, it's just like, oh, okay. And I come in here and it's just like, oh, okay, you know, I'm in a box, right? But then you come in here and you look and you're like, whoa, like I'm in this like weird tunnel. And then when you look out, this just looks freaking tits. You know, all the reflections on everything in here, it just looks great. Nice, nice effect there, I think. I am going to be putting the enemies in here, and again, I got reflections on here. The computer tower looks pretty cool too back here. It's kind of low resi, but you can see the reflections of stuff off of its own self. You can see the pink right here from this. The rubber for this plunger just looks fantastic. Just such good tone shifts. You know how hard it'd be to paint this in like Photoshop or something to get it to look that smoothly transitioned. It's just great. Again, if I look at that in UDK, of course it has light maps built into it. It's just very flat. It doesn't look like totally horrible, but then this kind of thing right here, light maps just didn't do a good job there. From here it just looks really flat, really basically flat. But yeah, if you look at it in UE4, it's just got really nice tones, really nice volume to the whole thing. No subsurface or anything like that. I'm not sure where this blue is coming from. I don't really see anything blue down here. This wicker basket is not very good. I don't really have the assets for that. Again, this plastic chair just looks really smooth. It doesn't have, you know, it's very dull. This right here, if we take a look, we do a comparison to what I'm seeing in UDK version here. You know, same normal map, same texture, same everything. But we got a pretty gnarly seam right here. This thing is not using light maps, by the way. I turned them off. I think I made it a dynamic object. But I mean, you can see lots of seams. And then when you go to the UE4 version, you know, it's just like a toiger. Very, very solid, no real seams. Maybe one or two here and there somewhere if I could maybe find them. I mean, you can see a little bit of triangulation, but it just looks nice and volumetric, you know, it just feels great. Feels great. I got the rat cage. I don't have a good material for the cedar chips down there. I'm actually tempted to try foliage for that once 4.7 drops, because you're supposed to be able to have thousands of them. I tell you where UDK does shine over UE4, at least for now, is here. This actually looks really nice in the UDK version, the way that it handles translucency and all of that stuff. It just comes out really clean and nice, and I feel I've always liked this right here Plus the joke is funny as shit. The funny part about the joke is that if the eye contact occurs, it's just epic fail. That's it. That's the whole advice. Just fail. So you can see here it's kind of bright. I tried tuning it back. I can't really get the translucency to work good. Obviously it doesn't pick up reflections, and it's just kind of dog shit, I'll be honest with you guys. So they're supposed to be working on that. So like this is really, like, literally out of all this stuff, this is like the one thing in the whole thing that I feel like UDK actually is doing much better, which is a pretty good track record for UE4. You can see, like, you know, the metals on these pot handles just looks great. This metal baseball bat just looks great. I really do want to add the rubber worn off kind of grip right here and probably throw a logo on it too, you know, like some kind of Little League logo. These sandbags look pretty good. These are very low res meshes. If you look at the side, you can see where the mesh is. It's just basically one segment of rows for each change in volume. This right here looks great, very smooth, very clean. Again, let's run a comparison on UE4, on UDK, and you just look at it and it's just like, yeah, I was never happy with this way this thing came out. Look at that, it's just garbage. And then if you look at it right here, it's just wondrous. It's just spectacular. I am one for very subtle shifts in tones. It's always been something that just draws my eye, and this is just exactly what I'm talking about. This is just such a nice shift in blues right there. It's really great. The other thing is these statuettes over here look really good in UE4. Like this one here. These are statuettes that I actually have, like, own. I got a little bit of problem here and there, but that was mostly the bake. For everything else, for the most part, looks really good. Yeah, so you can see some of the bakes got a little bit of waviness in it. That's kind of hard to avoid sometimes after doing thousands of them. But if you look at those again, we run a comparison to UE4. This one actually doesn't look too bad here. I actually think that, you know, UDK is still a good engine, don't get me wrong. It's not like it's total garbage. But this one right here, it's just, I couldn't really get it, and I couldn't get rid of all of these seams as well as I'd really hoped to. You know, you can just see it right there. It just doesn't look good at all. But, you know, throw that back to UE4 and it's just like, oh, thank you, finally it looks, you know, the normals aren't all jacked up. A little bit on the lips, but, you know, from any reasonable distance it's not going to be a problem. I'm not really sure what to do with the bear yet. I'm gonna, you know, I'll point out anything I don't feel like I'm doing all that well. I don't feel like I'm doing this material all that well, obviously, because the UDK version, all I have for this is just a diffuse texture. So I'm thinking about recreating this object in an actual, like, something like either ZBrush or Mudbox or just 3D Studio, and baking everything down. Because just from this texture, I tried the bitmap to material and it's just too hard. It's just not got enough in it. You can see in the UDK version it looks good, but there's nothing on it but a diffuse. That's it. It's just the diffuse texture. There's no specular, there's no normal map, there's nothing. There's literally nothing. So this styrofoam actually never really looked all that bad. I always thought it looked pretty good in the UDK version. Looks fine. It pretty much looks about the same in UE4. I'm not doing too much different here. Obviously I went with a gold frame on some of these paintings here. This one I did wood. I gotta recreate this material here. It's just something I just do it on temp, because it's obviously overly tiled. It does look good with the you know, with the gold on it, but I don't want all my I want different frames, you know. Maybe one of them be like a black plastic or something like that. I'm not very proud of this painting right here. I did make these paintings, but this one just I did this like, oh my even god, I don't even know, like in 2000, you know. And I just something, you know what, I'm gonna put in some of my really old art. This one I did a little bit more recently, probably about three years ago or something like that. It's all just Photoshop stuff. I didn't steal anything. I just pretty much painted it myself. These right here, painted myself too. They actually line up perfectly, but they're split. I actually have a painting like this, or had anyway. This right here looks really good too. This object, you go inside. I mean, there's a little bit of flighting information, but the thing is that this is a really crazy model to make in 3D. It's easy to make. It's hard to get smooth and clean because of how many crisscrossing edges are actually going on in this thing with all of these different. I quadranted them out for the different shapes, but still, you know, it's going to be real hard to avoid every issue on that. I did actually update the tent here so that you can get in and out from one side to the other, because my original tents you could only go in one way and then you were stuck in there, so you basically trapped yourself. I mean, it was a nice place to hide, but you trapped yourself. I still have that version, but I did go ahead and make one where you can get out from both sides. I thought that worked out a little bit better. The keyboard looks pretty good. It's reflective, you know, pretty reflective plastics, very smooth plastic. I actually have two versions of it. Okay, one is black. All right. The cubes are pretty good too. They're actually different colors than the UDK version. I swapped them so that it was RGB. Okay, I wanted to. If you pay close enough attention to the way, most of the way that I have things set up, there's a lot of RGB in that order in my game, like literally red, green, then blue. Not this one or anything like that, but you know, not everywhere. I need to break it up a little bit, you know what I'm saying? But there's a lot of primary colors going on everywhere in R.A.T.S. Very bright colors. If you look at this, the metal here looks pretty cool, all roughed up. Looks pretty nice. It didn't look too bad in the UDK version, to be honest. But if you look at the wheels, right, they got all these seams, and the metal doesn't look too bad, but it's just chock full of seams and just looks kind of, you know, pretty rough. But then when I take a look at this one out here, you know, just look at those wheels, you know. I don't even have any subsurface on there, and I feel like I just feel like it's doing it almost. I just feel like it's self-illuminating in a sense. It just looks really nice to me. One of the things I got to do is I got to fix the carpet. I got to make it the right kind of height map and all that stuff, and make sure that the values are correct. I know that this carpet doesn't look good at all. But the other thing that I wanted to do for the carpet, if that's even possible in 4.7, is I want to try to use foliage to make carpet hairs all over the place. So as you're running around, there's carpet hair everywhere. I think that would be awesome. This right here is just a straight up substance. There's nothing in it. I kind of wouldn't mind cutting this in the back and making this like a cardboard back here. The cardboard looks really smooth here too. You know, the tone shift between the surfaces, it just works out real nice, even on the inside. Looks real clean. This is nothing really to this material or object. It's pretty standard, but it's gonna go a long way. We got plastic on here. Looks pretty cool. Everything's R.A.T.Co. Everything's signed by Pauls. You know, obviously I can't put a 4096 on something like this. You know, I actually want to make a computer case like this. It would be cool. Like if I ever, you know, have any kind of success, I'll probably give away R.A.T.S themed computer cases, have them manufactured, and keep them subtle. This would be a computer case that I would actually use. The only thing I would change in reality would I'd put like some kind of handle system on the top, but I would actually rock something like this. I'm not a big fan of those crazy you know, stylish ones. Not that I think that they're designed bad. I don't really care for it. Here's all the movies that I created. They're all based on real stuff. They're all generally based on the same font. I have a lot of effed up jokes. If you guys want, I'll show you guys my worst joke. This isn't even in the game yet. This is my most brutal joke to date. The one I'm actually a little bit nervous about. If you know what these ingredients are, there's something wrong with you. I had to look it up. If this is it, this line right here, the protein line, is any indication of what this is, or the way that I've detailed the serving size, if that's any indication, then you should know what those ingredients are. Like I said, this is my most brutal joke. Now, you know, this game is going to be pretty non-M rated, but I don't think a young kid. I think this is going to blow right by a young kid's head. I don't even think they're going to know what I'm talking about. But then maybe later on down the line, they can get that joke and laugh. I think this is like one of my favorite ones ever. This is brutal. This is just a brutal stab. I love it. I love it. I got quite a few stabs at the world. Here we go. These will make it into... So, I tried to make it so that you couldn't really read this, but it's Simpsons OJ, and you slice through thirst, and obviously there's 2 oranges, and they're dripping their juice everywhere, and it's a big carving knife at the top. You know, it's just... I'm not the one who did that, you know? I made that joke, though. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be plenty of that kind of stuff in there. And then there is one more joke that I might actually get in trouble for. And I kind of hesitate to point it out because I think the only way that I'm not going to get in trouble is if nobody actually figures it out. So, but it's right here. So, 3, 2, 1, hit pause, signing off. Thanks for watching.